This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis. This program is brought.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight, once again, the redoubtable Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Solving the problems of the world one at a time.
Right. We've tried to have numerous conversations on numerous subjects, and we've both, and I would say this is fair, been troubled by a lot of the events that are taking place in the Republic, our beloved country, the tensions that are out there. And in the past, we've criticized political correctness, that's fair to say, but is there something that's out there that's civility or restraint in speech, a politeness that seems to be flying out the window these days? Any comments about that? I mean,
the first comment that comes to mind is that in the last few decades we invented what is without doubt the greatest communication system, the greatest aid to communications in the history of the human race, the internet. And what do we do with it? We use it to share stupid videos and argue incessantly with people that we've never met before and will have no dealings with. If you go to just about any thread discussing any public issue today, it's a free-for-all. It's just unbelievable. It descends into ad hominem attacks, profanity, and it's just amazing.
Well, let's discuss ad hominem attacks.
Yes.
I mean, this happens on both sides, but you could say that Donald Trump is certainly attacking people, which is distressing to me. And whether you're on the right or the left,
Yes.
the idea of just pillaring different groups of people, that seems to be, I mean, to me, a very wrong thing. And contrary-wise, on the left, the idea of actually there's a racial attack. You could say it's a fair statement against Caucasians. I mean, there's the level of anger that's expressed between different groups in the country seems to be increasing. We could talk a lot about that. Is it a purgative? Are these interchanges, are they useful? I mean, if people yell at each other and coarsely on the streets or on the internet or on television and debates and mocking each other for their appearance or whatever, you're a loser or you're just an idiot or whatever people say, or you're not truthful, and it's like a third grade exercise. Is that a useful thing to do? I mean, does that help? I mean, does it diminish tension somehow, or does it increase it?
Well, I think the phrase that you're looking for and wondering whether it applies is the blowing off steam concept. And I think within certain limits, blowing off steam works. I have often written letters in which I have blown off steam and then I haven't sent the letters.
Yes.
And I felt better. I don't know if that's good for my psychological well-being in the long term or not.
Right.
But as an ongoing, sustained exercise, I'm not sure.
Yes.
I think that the reason we have the First Amendment and the reason that the Age of Enlightenment saw freedom of speech and press as so important was the idea, the belief in an absolute objective truth. And the way that we achieve this truth is that we go into the marketplace of ideas. We pull our ideas out, we do verbal combat,
Yes.
and the better ideas, the ones that are more true, will be the ones to survive and to prevail. And if you put it like that, the fighting words that we are seeing just don't seem to be moving us in that direction whatsoever. It feeds the fire.
Yes. Well, I'm not sure what the right balance is to the golden mean to discuss Aristotelian ideas
Yes.
here, but it does seem like the level of tension in the country is on the increase, and the polarization seems to be increasing. And it looks like one thing, we discussed this before, is we have politically correct kind of conversation. And in that politically correct interchange, there's aggrieved protected classes, to say it that way, often say, well, this type of interchange is impossible. I'm going to set the agenda. And on the other hand, there's nothing I can say that you could take offense to. So you can't say anything against me, but I can say all I wish against you. And now the situation is sort of going the other way. The other side is just yelling back.
Yes.
And the whatever the advantages of politically correct arrangements were, which you could say, in some ways damp down tensions. I mean, at least in some ways. Well, you could make that comment. I won't push that too.
I might disagree with
I know
that.
I'm gently
I'll let
treading
you
on
go
this
ahead.
subject,
Yes.
as we've attacked political correctness before.
Yes.
But for the purpose of our interchange here, I'm trying to put the best face on it. Okay, or at least maybe the rhetoric is diminished. But the other side now is just lashing back, seemingly led by Donald Trump, and the level of discourse does seem to have coarsened substantially. And in our country, where we have such a diverse group of, it's just incredible. There are 330 million people from everywhere, all kinds of different viewpoints, and they're in rapid communication with each other. Their tensions, their foibles, their good things, bad things immediately appear. Sharp elbows are the name of the game these days. Is that appropriate? I mean, at a political debate, should the moderator just say, well, ad hominem attacks are off limits? I mean, any thoughts about that?
Yes, but who is the moderator? And do we even have one at all?
Really?
Well, I think you're seeing to a degree, and I've stressed that phrase, to a degree, the same situation in public debate that you were seeing with cell phone cameras and police body cams and this sort of thing. That we have always had these confrontations. You've always had officers who have been shooting suspects in at least arguably questionable situations. You have had ad hominem attacks, you've had coarse language, but because of modern communications and modern technology, we're much more aware of it now. To draw an analogy, war has always been a horrible thing. William Sherman, I think, said it best for the ages. War is hell, and there's nothing to do about it except get it over with faster. I'm paraphrasing there. But so in that sense, Vietnam was not any worse than any other war. But what was different about Vietnam? What was different was that the democratic society that had engaged in that war could see what warfare was really like, and it horrified them. And as a result, you've never seen the American people trust the American government to the same degree that it had before that war. Video cameras, the internet, the Twitterverse are doing for public discourse what modern media did for war in Vietnam, and it's ugly. It's not nice, and there's no end to it.
Well, one of the things that seems to be happening, if I can say it this way, we have these societal events that create tension, but it's rare that we have any kind of numbers put on it. So you have sort of picked examples of tension, and many times it's in the interest of news organizations to try and put the most visually compelling picture up that plays into the deep atavistic tensions of humans.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Right, that's correct. So you have, oh, look at that, whatever it is, somebody killed that cat, or whatever the story, I mean, I don't know.
They did what?
Killed a cat, right?
Oh, no.
And there's a
No.
person that's
Oh,
murdered
no.
4 cats,
You
whatever,
just-
whatever the
Okay,
story
I'm
is, I'm saying
I'm
this
sorry.
is.
You
for
shouldn't
many-
have told me that.
Pardon me, Bucky, but it would resonate. I mean, some kind of things just resonate. I mean, I can think of a lot more lurid stories, maybe, and it's a picked example, and we could say, well, on some kind of racial front, a person of one race or another just strikes the person of another, whatever the story is, any particular combination of events, and the media captures this, and it really resonates with people. They want to see it. It's a picked example. And the 2 things that are going on. Number one is the, quote, media, whatever that is, their compensation depends on ratings. So in a way, they sort of play to the purulent interest of their viewers or readers, and they get more money. So the people in the newsroom, their bonuses go up. Let's find something incredible to put there.
Yes.
You could look at the New York newspapers or the tabloids, and you could say in many circumstances, media has sort of played this tabloid card without any reference to numbers, finding picked examples and playing on some of the weaknesses of the country.
Yes.
And I would call it a weakness. And diversity has its good side, it has its bad side, but in difficult times, this, quote, diversity causes substantial difficulties.
Yes. Well, it's actually gone beyond. I think everything you've said is true, but it's now gone beyond that. And in going beyond that, I don't think it can be controlled anymore. And I'm thinking of the Minnesota shooting. There were two notorious shootings
Yes.
last week as we record this. But the Minnesota shooting did not involve the institutional media at all, at least not at the beginning. It was being live streamed directly to Facebook, decentralized.
Yes.
There was no New York Times, there was no CBS that could cut down the feed or
Yes.
even push the feed out. So how do you control something like that? It just feeds the fire directly. And that's why I say it's just going to become worse and worse and worse. That no matter if every single police shooting from now until 100 years from now is absolutely justified, if many of these shootings get pushed directly to social media, they're going to upset somebody, rightly or wrongly.
Yes. And it brings up some of the centrifugal force in the country. I mean, there's a substantial amount of centrifugal force there. The country is, in some ways, an artificial construct. I mean, it wasn't hatched out here 5,000 years ago. We've discussed nation states before. It has its own issues here, and getting a common national identity turns out to be an important issue.
Yes, the American civil religion is the only thing that unites us.
And you know, the story is, I mean, we could discuss this briefly, in maintaining law and order, or putting some rules in place. How does one enforce those rules that are often very difficult to enforce, that cause all sorts of tension? And I'm coming to another subject slightly, in regards to minority communities, soon to be majority, but minority right now, should they have their own police force? I mean, should there be some kind of test of ethnicity on people that police certain neighborhoods? And isn't that a total rejection of Martin Luther King's viewpoints about everyone, the skin color doesn't matter at all, and that we really are sort of, the tensions on the street will cause more of a segregation of society, or building walls around different communities. So this community has you can't really work in that community unless you have a certain ethnicity or a certain, any comments about that?
Well, it's an interesting view of sociology, that the very famous case of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954 that began the desegregation of American society. The Supreme Court indulged in sociology. And it said that even if a black school was equal in all respects to a white school, which of course was never the case back then. The black schools had inferior physical plants and worse textbooks.
But that was the ideal, but it didn't work.
But even if they were perfectly equal, the Supreme Court said by forcing one community of people to go to a black school, by forcing African Americans to go to this school, it essentially tars them with the brush of inferiority, the badge of inferiority.
Yes.
And so separate can never be equal. Well, that wasn't law, that was sociology. And within 20 or 30 years, you saw the black community saying perhaps black schools would be better. So the black community would see black teachers as black role models. Look at what the Dallas police chief has said just in the last few days at the time of this taping, that if you've got a problem with the system, become part of the system and change it. He was reaching out, I think, to members of Black Lives Matter, saying, join the police force. We will put you in, and I'm not sure if he said we will put you in these black neighborhoods, but I think that was the suggestion. We will put you in those neighborhoods, And so you can deal with those problems directly, make the police a trusted force for change in that community. So I think that's what we're hearing. It's a radically different sociology, but it does lead to a type of balkanization, assuming it works.
And I just wonder if there's evidence on, is that the way to solve some of these tensions, that you have a balkanization, to use your word, of any kind of enforcement arrangements? I mean, should you have IRS agents that deal with a particular ethnic group? Or should you have judges of a particular ethnic group that only pass judgment on people in that ethnic
Where
group?
does it stop? Yes.
And that no ethnic group can depend on justice or fair play from another. So we have this tremendous change in the whole psyche of the country, and you can imagine what the end result would be. You could imagine that. I mean, we have different views of the country. We have a melting pot kind of arrangement. So the idea is, from a complicated journey toward a national creed, we're going to, many people from everywhere, the Statue of Liberty, everyone is going to come here. It's going to be a great experience. We'll melt together into some kind of new creature, and our broad amber waves of grain, whatever, the whole story here about how great the experience would be. And we'd all have a sense of brotherhood from sea to shining sea. I mean, that would be the idea. And another idea is, no, we can never be one society, because one particular group has injured another and will continue to do so. And the only way that we can have justice and fairness in the country is to balkanize it, because we can't trust each other. And we're going to have to just put little enclaves everywhere. I mean, a different political system. So the arbitrary boundaries of the state would be turned into sort of ethnic homelands, as in South Africa. I mean, different. Was that the answer? Just to throw, that's a pretty I'm being quite extreme deliberately.
It sounds extreme, but there actually is precedent for this in the American experience to a degree, and that precedent is called federalism. And the original idea of federalism is that, or was that, a New Yorker is different from a Georgian. A New Yorker would have different economic interests, different growing season, different geography, perhaps even to a degree a different ethnicity, though that's a debatable thing. But the defining element of that federalism, of course, was geography. So the idea that there is something that unites us, and that whatever this thing is best handled by all of us together at the federal level. And there are other things that are of more local concern, and these should be handled at the local level. That lies at the heart of federalism. I think where you're changing that is it's no longer determined by geography, it is determined by ethnicity, or at least socioeconomic class. And so you have two basic ideas of law. The law is geographic, or the law reaches you based on who you are. If you're a Roman citizen, for instance, St. Paul in the New Testament, you can't judge me. I'm a Roman citizen and I appeal to Rome.
Yes.
No matter where I go in the empire, I carry this law with me.
Yes.
And so instead of the territorial idea of traditional American federalism, you're arguing more the personal level. I am African American, I am Latino American, and therefore I carry this law with me and am judged by these people, by this ethos. Can it be done? I don't know. Should it be done?
Well, it's a very restrictive. I mean, this is sort of, I mean, in some ways going into new territory.
Indeed.
Many countries have a totally different arrangement, and maybe we can look at the French situation, where they have the law makes they don't do statistical analysis. They treat everyone as a French citizen. There's no affirmative action. There's none of this. There's none of that. You can't wear a burqa. We all have to be the same. You have the same test that you take, and it's a real straight 1, 2, 3 kind of deal here. There's not any accommodation for any of that. And yet in France, the tensions, particularly between the Islamic minority and the traditional French majority, is very acute, and they're not being homogenized, to use that word. And yet in the U.S., where we have lots of, particularization that occurs, there is still some substantial homogenization. So if a Syrian, just to make a case, if a Syrian refugee, and I've known some, come to the U.S., they often get pretty much in the middle of this the stream here, and if they go to Sweden, it's another story there. I mean, and it's kind of a contradictory kind of thing that many people can be homogenized.
Yes.
And yeah, any thoughts about? Is there another?
Well, I would say if you follow the federalism model, it would be a matter of to what degree of homogenization. That let's say you have the black culture, the Latino culture, and I'm just using this because ethnicity is so
Yes,
obvious. The white culture, that they would decide things pertaining to themselves within their own little federal enclave.
Right.
But at another level, they would all have to submit to the overarching federal system, the central government, if you would.
Yes.
So how do you make the two work? How do you reconcile the local with the universal?
Another thing that seems to be happening, we've spoken about this before, is the idea that we have in our congressional system, we have enclaves that are deliberately carved out to protect, particularly Afro-American politicians. They represent this group, and as a result, on the other side of the card, that means everyone else is in a European-American situation. So we have these. There's not any need for accommodation. So we have this sense of separation and isolation and I guess jealousy and sometimes hatred that is caused by these invisible walls that are being created. And is there any obvious solution?
Yes. Well, sometimes visible walls. I have to take a swipe at Speaker Paul Ryan with having built a physical wall around his property and denying that we need a wall with Mexico. He either needs
although
yes.
the Republicans, I mean, we can talk about
Yes.
walls, and so the Republicans want to put a wall in their I guess their convention program. I mean, they're putting
Yes.
together their policies, and one that would be
Yes.
Dr. Donald Trump's idea. They said, well, let's do that.
Yes. Well, many of the people who say that walls don't work are protecting themselves with walls. So they
Yes.
either need to practice what they preach or preach what they practice.
Yes, but I mean,
not-
so
yeah.
I guess what I'm getting into in a way is how does the idea that diversity is being praised and espoused, and the idea is particularly if you're a protected, prosperous person in an avant-garde urban neighborhood,
Yes.
it sounds pretty good. I mean, you've got really nice people that are really smart that have come here from everywhere. There are great restaurants. You get, I don't know, they have different cultural offerings that are attractive and interesting. So you have, I don't know, the Cuban ballet is there one time,
Yes.
and then maybe the Egyptian poetry reading. And all this is very stimulating and pleasant in some circles.
Yes.
On the other hand, you have the idea that the diversity, particularly with the European American community, which is something Donald Trump is discussing or making reference to, it's an assault. It's the traditional European American country, Christian American country, is being altered by demographics, and that's causing all of this blowback, tension, and it's a little frightening.
Yes.
About how people are responding to this.
And I think that's the criticism, that there's a lack of assimilation, that there's a lack of buying into the American civil religion, that if you, for instance, look at the huge influx of Irish into the United States in the 1840s, the 1850s, and the 1860s. In the 1860s, 1/4 of the population of New York City had been born, and they were not of Irish descent, they had been born in Ireland.
Yes.
And yet, by and large, what did they try to do? They tried to blend in. They tried to become American. That the Irish community felt that it had finally arrived when John F. Kennedy was elected president
Yes,
a
indeed.
century later. That was their goal, to be accepted and to blend in. Is that the goal of modern immigration? Or do we now have an allegiance to our nationality, our ethnicity? And that allegiance trumps if you pardon the pun,
yes, right.
the American civil religion.
Yes. Well, I mean, you made reference to John F. Kennedy, and the idea one can remember it was a tremendous barrier if you're a Catholic to
Yes.
it was kind of a throwback in some ways to the 17th century. The religious wars, the 17th century had sort of been imprinted a long time in Anglo world, Elizabeth, and the idea that you couldn't attend Oxford and Cambridge, or you couldn't be
Yes.
elected to Parliament if you were a Catholic. All these different.
Of course, as they say in Massachusetts, there are not a whole lot of Catholic Kennedys in Massachusetts, but there are a lot of Kennedy Catholics.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's clever. Well, so in a way, you could say it was good. It was certainly good for the country. I mean, we have, okay, we really expanded. To use a word that's out there a lot, we became inclusive.
Yes.
So it's interesting, isn't it, that we're using the word inclusive and diversity at the same time. So what exactly does that mean? It means you're taking the circle goes out. It includes people that are different. Sort of the circle goes out, and the assumption is once everyone is inside the circle, they'll all get along. It'll be okay. And there's always tension when that happens. We went through some the John F. Kennedy story, which in many ways is just an extraordinary watershed in American history, and his martyrdom, if you wanted to use those words, it struck everyone. And this was many, although we didn't know the whole story, shall we say, that he was a man of perfect demeanor and conduct with a beautiful wife. So everyone could empathize with a young person being struck down, and so that had a big resonating impact. And then I think President Obama has had the same impact for African Americans, or actually anyone of non-European descent. The idea that we do have the circle has widened, it has become more inclusive. And the question is, inside this circle, are we going to create other circles? So we've expanded everything, so everyone is in the mix here, but we're now going to reconstruct the walls between the different groups that are included in the circle, and it's going to be difficult to melt. When the Bunsen burner is put beneath the body politic of America, instead of creating a soup, it's causing, it seems to me, more restriction between the groups.
Yes. Well, to stay with my model and to modify your model just a little bit, I would say this circle. Is there or is there not a price of admission? And the price of admission being a profession and adherence to the American civil religion, however we choose to define that, Bill of Rights or four freedoms. But once you have pledged your allegiance to that American civil religion, then you are welcomed within the circle, and as long as you continue to be a devotee of that civil religion, you may form sub-circles within that circle. And that's where the federalism comes in. So you can develop your own culture, you can associate with your own culture, and it may be a matter not of ethnicity, but of money. For instance, once again, Paul Ryan, Hillary Clinton, I think are both protected by walls. One's Republican, one's Democrat, one's male, one's female. Barack Obama, but they have money and they have power, and so they are insulated from rough and tumble. But so unity in some things, diversity in others.
Now, just to go back to the way we started our conversation, having run around the bases, we've gone to first, second, third, now we're coming in toward home. We started our conversation by talking about the need for civility. And so if we have these circles that are all in there together and they're trying to get along with each other, the idea of civility turns out to be an important concept. And I'll make reference to China. I mean, the idea of maybe we discussed this before, but I can pronounce this Li. I get that right. That means, pardon me if any Chinese speakers are out there, I believe that means harmony. And it's a character that symbolizes the whole idea of Confucius and Buddha and the restraint and politeness by which one deals with other people. So there's an enormous code of politeness that exists, and it's a useful kind of thing. The idea is we're going to have a harmonious society, and can we have a harmonious society? Do we have to make sacrifices to do that? And that's at least one card in the deck, I would say, going in that direction.
And I guess that's where the American civil religion would come in. And I'd like to end on an ominous note here. With the hair trigger that we've got now, and the Twitterverse, and being able to
Right.
have a huge audience. If we don't police ourselves, might it be that Big Brother will police us out of necessity someday?
Well, on that note, thank you for coming, Bunky. It's a pleasure to talk to you
Appreciate
once
it.
again. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.